This is Beatha. Well, it's actually a doorknob. The doorknob to my bedroom when I was a wee bairn. At one point my parents switched it out and I saw it and I thought, that's a freaking globe. And I kept it all this time. I first got introduced to D&D in college and I loved my experiences right away with my first DM. Had a really good time, a lot of fun, and played on and off till the wee hours of the morning various times throughout my latter half of college. Anyway, I fell in love with it. I've always loved to tell stories. I've always loved to do my own world building. I've had a passion for storytelling and world building since I was a little child. About 8 or 9 years ago, I think, I DM'd my first ever session, and it was session 1 of our very first campaign that is still going on, and took place in my world that I had created, and it was a blast. I think we started them at level 2, I think, and then they became level 3 pretty quickly. Since then, that one has continued to go on and off for the last 8 or 9 years. I'm currently doing 2, I'm calling them mini campaigns, but they're really turning out to just be like kind of normal sized campaigns. But I'm doing two different campaigns with different groups of people right now, and waiting on having the time to do a couple of one-shots with some different groups of people. And then I've got a couple of side mini campaigns that are connected to larger campaigns that we're going to do because some people in our friend group have had kids recently, and availability is shifting around. In my earlier years DMing, I found myself losing faith in my stories and worried that things were getting boring for them, or that I couldn't keep all the details together. And so I would probably partial coping mechanism, partial joy of creation. I would then go and just create a new area in my world, a new campaign, and we would just start in on that. And so we had like 4 campaigns going at once, and then I had another with the same group of people, and then I had another campaign going with some other people, and a lot of, one of them petered out. One of them things were going so poorly for the group that we eventually, so far, we've put it on ice. The other 3 with that same group are still going, but I've gotten way better at just focusing on, let's finish a very, very intense arc, if not the entire campaign, then move on to the next one and try and finish it, then move on to the next one and try and finish it. They're all very different, and I'll eventually get into explaining all the different campaigns we've done. I've also done many, many one-shots, and I've done a campaign with 2 people. I'm pointing at the map that's up on my wall that I'll show you eventually. On this little island on the south part of my world. Basically, we've played here, 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 somewhere around here, a little bit over here, over here, a little bit over here, a little bit over here, and potentially other places. So what I love in doing the different campaigns and one-shots is to get to jump around to all these different environments, these different worlds. Different worlds. They feel like different worlds. But they're all connected, and almost all my campaigns are contemporary to each other, contemporaneous, except for one that is set like 20 years in the past while they're kids, and they will continue to grow up and will jump periods of time. If I'm creating a world, I do not think of myself as the god or creator of that world. I think of myself as the discoverer of that world. And as with any discoverer, you discover one data point at a time, and you do what you can to synthesize the information. But for me, I found that anytime I tried to hyper plan, for me, it did not work. I would get too stifled, and I would the sense of creativity and inspiration and intuition would get choked out by overthinking things and trying to make things realistic. Because this is a world full of magic and gods and angels and demons and genies and random fey spirits and elementals and different planes and dimensions. I am not trying to create a hyper-realistic world, but I want it to feel real. Kind of like if you've ever looked up or watched a video or something on the difference between realism and verisimilitude. I'm not trying to make everything hyper gritty, hyper real, but I do want it to feel true. And so, so when I approach considerations of realism, over the years I have learned to approach them with much more of a casual demeanor. I'm not so much approaching them like, okay, this all has to work and I have to have all the answers right now. It's okay to have blank spaces. It's okay to see something, and even if it looks like an anomaly, you don't even have to know how it became an anomaly at that moment. The reason why it is the way it is could pop up to you years down the road. I'm a huge fan of DMing intuitively and even prepping intuitively, and then vetting it more intellectually and thinking like, okay, are there any obvious illogicalities or huge contradictions or better opportunities that I could kind of experiment with? But in general, I've now realized, and it's made me way more efficient at preparing for my games, especially because I know the world a lot better over all these years. But to think, to let myself go intuitively and not hold myself to having all the answers, all the whys and the whats and the whens and the wheres and the whos and the hows, and to just let it be. Because I am a co-discoverer with my other players, with like the Lord showing me things. I'm just discovering this world. I am not creating it. That is a big view of mine. And I'll still say like, yeah, I created this world, but I don't say it in a huge like ownership responsibility way. I'm proud of it. I like the world. I think it's a good mix between my vision, each individual campaign player's desires of the kind of experience they wanted to have, D&D mechanics that give us a common language to speak as we play this game. I think it's a really good mix of all these different things. It's an amalgamation of a lot of different things, and it's a living thing. And I don't consider it like I am its life support. I'm just the chief discoverer of this world and the chief explorer. Even with Judeo-Christianity, the Hebrew faith, the Jewish faith, into the Christian faith, and looking at all the other faiths, all the other religions that have been around for thousands of years, or centuries to thousands of years, and looking at the scientific method and science and everything we've discovered, there's no point where we have had a full, perfect, complete picture of all knowledge and revelation, whether on a scientific or a spiritual level. The revelation in my Judeo-Christian faith, tracing the history, the lineage of the faith that I hold, tracing it back, God had his revelation that he gave us on a very slow drip. And so at any point in time, we have a certain degree of information in revelation, but not the full degree. And even now that the fullness, that Jesus is the final prophet, the full radiance and likeness of God, the exact representation of his image, even with that, Jesus has not been fully revealed as he will when he comes back as the conquering king. And so I see enough to believe in him, but I still don't know and understand fully. And so if that's the case, and that's like real life, all this incomplete information that is slowly being developed over thousands of years, then it makes sense that I can have information that is either locally held with great conviction or that is universally vague and anywhere in between and beyond that spectrum. Because I believe a sermon should tell you something directly. It's more like a mathematical equation. But a story is more similar to a song. A story is supposed to bring you into a place of, not a place of questioning, but it's supposed to bring you into a question, into a place where you can explore things kind of in flux. And the truths that you discover there are often like in-process truths, or they're truths that as they settle into you and as they start to fit into your brain, they're not being fitted in consciously. It's kind of like your perspective on things is just slowly starting to shift as you're continually being exposed to these different circumstances. Just like any of us, if you lived in a library your entire life, you could form a lot of very distinct opinions that are all theoretical. But it's not until you get out and start interacting with people, until you suffer tragedy and loss, great success, great defeat, until you like go out into the real world and just live and have experiences and conversations with different people with different perspectives. It's not until you do all this stuff that you can even really begin to expand your mind and start to like lock things into your understanding of reality. And the more you do that, I think like I have gotten a lot of my certain convictions have deepened over time. But even at the same time, the amount of the conviction that has deepened has become smaller and smaller, more compact. And there are parts of the conviction around it that are not as deep, that are like, I'm holding on to this kernel, this I am convinced of. But the other parts, I understand that this could very well shift. And that's kind of my approach to life. I want truth. I want capital T, absolute truth. I want to discover it more and more. I want to explore it. And I know that I'm just one dude. And so I want to co-discover and co-explore with people. So that's the experience that I like to give people in D&D. In the midst of that, I like to give them insane encounters that force them to be creative, to use their mind. I like to make them feel like their lives are on the line. I like them also to feel very powerful. I like them to feel rewarded. I like them to feel like their actions have massive, not always massive consequences like disproportionate, but I like them to feel like they are changing the shape of history as they're going through this game in this world, which they do. I want them to feel like every single thing they touch feels solid. Like it has a texture, it has an interaction and a reaction, and that there's nothing that they ever touch where it's like, oh, that was just a trope, or oh, so I wasn't supposed to go over there. You can feel like it's true, you can feel like it's real, and inevitably, we bring parts of ourselves to every character we play. Rarely, if ever, do we bring all of ourselves to one given character, but we always bring part of ourselves to each character. And they may be mixed up and have shared traits or what have you. My biggest passion in D&D is it's actually not to tell a good story. My biggest passion in D&D is to unlock the people at the table, to bring them to places internally that they have never been before, and to give them a space where they can almost unconsciously process themes and topics and concerns and issues that are going on in their own mind and their own life so maybe indirectly, sometimes unconsciously, sometimes just indirectly, but they're sort of conscious of it. But I want to address people's fears and insecurities. I want to address their hopes and dreams. I want to challenge them. I want to stretch them. I want us to have a lot of fun. I want us to have a lot of emotional depth. I want us to feel very accomplished and challenged. I want it to be a place where people come to live. That's what I want. Not to like do life. Like, I'll exist here. Not to exist, but to live. To truly live. And if that sounds like a tall order, well, before any session that I play with fellow believers, I always open with prayer. Recently, the phrase came out, which sounds pretty kitschy, but it works, of before we play, let us pray. And the main thing that I always pray, thank you for these friends. Thank you for bringing us together. Thank you for the time that we can all make in our adult lives to come back here and like still just have fun. But I would say my main prayer with D&D is, Lord, you are the master storyteller. God uses story all the time. He used story in the Old and New Testament when he would communicate with us. And there's something mysterious to story, and story has a way of conveying information on a heart level and bypassing the mind in a lot of ways. I could go on. But for now, all I shall say is, ad vitam et gloriam Dei. God bless. Oh! Almost right at 3. Perfect timing.